speak to the part of you that still hopes. The part that, despite everything, hasn't given up. Isolation. It's one of the most painful human experiences. It feels like exile from people, from purpose, even from yourself. When the phone doesn't ring, when no one checks in, when your heart echoes in an empty room, it's easy to believe you've been abandoned. But here's the hard truth. Isolation is not always punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. Think of it. Every significant transformation, personal, spiritual, psychological, it begins in solitude. The cocoon must close before the butterfly emerges. The seed must fall into the ground and die in darkness before it bears fruit. So when you're alone, don't assume you've been cast out. Maybe you've been set apart. Maybe you are not being rejected. Maybe you are being refined. Sometimes God, or if you prefer life, the universe, a higher intelligence, pulls you away from the noise so that you can hear your own voice again. Or perhaps so you can hear His. In that silence, your thoughts sharpen, your values clarify, your purpose whispers. And in that space, transformation begins. But it's not comfortable. Growth never is. So don't despair. When you are isolated, consider what is being removed from you, what is being revealed in you, what might be forming within you. It's in those moments when no one is watching that your character is forged, that your faith is tested, that your resilience is built. And when the season shifts, and it will, you will emerge stronger, wiser, and ready for the weight of the responsibility that awaits you. Because here's the paradox. Before you're given a platform, you're often given a wilderness. Before you're trusted with influence, you're tested in silence. So hold the line, stay the course. You're not forgotten, you're being formed. Don't worry, God isolates you for a reason. Do not despair. Isolation often feels like rejection, but that's a shallow interpretation of a deeply meaningful process. When life begins to strip you of social contact, of familiar comforts, or even of your own sense of direction, it's not necessarily because you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's because you're being pulled into a space where something profound can happen, something that needs silence and stillness to occur. The modern world is constantly buzzing, filled with distraction, noise, and endless stimuli. In such an environment, clarity is rare. Depth is almost impossible. So what happens when all of that is stripped away? You're left with yourself. And that is exactly where true change begins. Think about the metaphor of a seed. In order to become a tree, the seed must go underground. It must break open in the dark, in a place no one sees, in complete isolation. There's no applause, no affirmation, no recognition, just the quiet work of transformation. Human growth is much the same. When you're removed from the crowd, from the rhythms and relationships that once defined you, you're not being discarded. You're being repositioned for growth. You're being invited into a deeper dialogue with your own soul. People tend to resist isolation because it exposes what they'd rather ignore. The noise of community can drown out insecurities and unanswered questions. But in solitude, those buried doubts, old wounds, and dormant dreams come to the surface. And yes, it's uncomfortable. It can even be agonizing. But it's also real. It's honest. And if you're willing to face what you find there, it becomes the ground zero of transformation. What seems like abandonment may actually be alignment. You're being aligned with a version of yourself that isn't yet visible. You're being refined for a future role, a deeper purpose, a kind of impact that can't be carried by the old version of you. This is where people misunderstand pain. They assume it has no function beyond discomfort. But pain, especially the pain of isolation, often signals that something is shifting. The old framework is being dismantled, not because it failed, but because it's no longer sufficient for what comes next. When that dismantling is done in solitude, it becomes more intimate, more surgical. You begin to see not only what was holding you back, but also what must now be built within you. Isolation, then, is not a setback. It's sacred space, reserved for those who are being prepared for something more. Silence and solitude are not empty. They are full of potential. In fact, they are the very conditions required for meaningful growth to take place. When we are constantly surrounded by others, wrapped in conversations, distractions, and social obligations, it becomes incredibly difficult to hear ourselves think, let alone reflect deeply. We are conditioned to seek validation from external sources, to measure our worth through comparison, and to avoid stillness at all costs. But when everything around us becomes quiet, when the noise is stripped away, we are finally left with the truth that can only come from within. In that silence, something powerful begins to emerge. It's not immediate, and it's rarely comfortable, but it's essential. Your inner voice, long buried under the expectations of others, starts to rise. Your values, your convictions, your unfiltered thoughts, those are what begin to take shape. Solitude creates the space for this emergence. Without it, the voice of the crowd will always be louder than your own. Growth requires that you slow down, that you sit in the quiet long enough to confront your thoughts without judgment or escape. There's also a sobering honesty in solitude. You come face to face with the parts of yourself you usually ignore, the insecurities, the unfinished dreams, the false narratives. When you're no longer performing for anyone, there's no mask to wear. You begin to see yourself not as others see you, but as you truly are. That's where real transformation begins. Not in pretending, not in striving to impress, but in acknowledging what's raw and real. In the quiet, you begin to recognize what must be shed and what must be nurtured. Even spiritually and psychologically, many breakthroughs happen in solitude. Throughout history, individuals who have made deep impacts on the world, thinkers, prophets, creators, and leaders, spent seasons in isolation, not because they were weak, but because the silence became a crucible. It was in the desert, not the spotlight, that they found clarity. Growth is not forged in the crowd. It's forged in the cave. You must face yourself before you're capable of facing the world. This quiet space, though difficult, becomes a mirror. It shows you who you've been, and it begins to hint at who you could become. Without the noise, your purpose doesn't just echo louder, it becomes unavoidable. And that is why growth demands solitude, because in the silence, the truth speaks. When things are stripped away from your life, people, positions, places, it's easy to assume you've done something wrong. The immediate instinct is to interpret loss as rejection. But rejection and refinement often look the same on the surface, even though they serve entirely different purposes. What feels like being cast aside might in fact be a sacred moment of being set apart. There's a deep and often uncomfortable wisdom in recognizing that not everything removed from your life was meant to stay. Sometimes It's not that you're being punished, but that you're being protected, or better yet, prepared. There are times when God or life itself will start to remove what no longer serves your higher purpose. This could be relationships that drain you, habits that limit you, or environments that no longer reflect who you're becoming. And because we are creatures of habit and comfort, we resist this process. We hold on to what is familiar, even if it's toxic, because at least it's known. But growth rarely comes from comfort. It comes from disruption, from detachment, from letting go. There is something profoundly intentional about the process of refinement. It's not chaotic, it's targeted. It goes beneath the surface, cutting away not just what's unnecessary, but what is actively holding you back from the next version of your life. And because we often don't see that next version clearly yet, we misinterpret the pruning. We think we're losing, but in truth, we're being made lighter so we can carry more. Being refined means being shaped, being focused, being made whole, even if it hurts. It takes trust to believe that something better is being formed in the background while everything you've known is being dismantled. But that's the point. Refinement isn't about what's being taken away, it's about what's being revealed in the absence. When your identity is no longer wrapped up in what others think, or what roles you play, or what comfort zones you maintain, you begin to see who you really are. You begin to uncover the depth, the strength, the authenticity that was buried beneath all the layers of performance. Sometimes God removes to refine, not to reject, not to punish, and certainly not to abandon. What he pulls away, he does so with purpose, not to leave you empty, but to fill you with something greater, something more aligned with who you are meant to become. What feels like a breaking down may actually be a building up. Before any significant role is given, there is always a period of proving. Before you are entrusted with influence, leadership, or responsibility, life will test your foundation. That testing rarely happens in public. It begins in the quiet, behind the scenes, when no one is watching and there is no pause. It's in those hidden seasons where the silence is deafening and the path feels uncertain that the deeper parts of your character are forged. If you skip this process or resist it, you may reach influence without integrity, and that's a collapse waiting to happen. True strength is not built in the spotlight, it's developed in the shadows. Responsibility is heavy, and those who are called to carry it must be prepared. If you're going to lead others, you must first learn to lead yourself. That's why isolation often precedes purpose. It's not a delay, it's an essential part of development. You are being stripped of what you don't need and strengthened in areas where you were previously weak. In that quiet space, you learn how to manage your emotions, discipline your thoughts, and stand firm without needing validation. These are not glamorous skills, but they are the very qualities that sustain you when the stakes are high. Before a platform, there must be process. This is one of the most overlooked truths in our culture of instant success. We see the results of someone's growth, but we don't witness the years of solitude, the failures, the sacrifices, and the inner battles that shaped them. We want the fruit without the root. But anything meaningful, anything lasting must be built on something deeper than talent. It must be anchored in tested values and hard-earned wisdom. When you're in a season where nothing seems to be moving, when doors are shut and progress is invisible, that's not proof that you're unqualified. It may be the very sign that you are being refined for a greater task. Life, or God, is saying, not yet, Not because you'll never get there, but because when you do, I want you to be ready. Preparation is a form of love. It protects you from collapsing under the weight of success you weren't built to carry. The silence, the waiting, a sense of obscurity, it all has purpose. It builds in you the kind of foundation that doesn't crack when pressure comes. You're not being delayed, you're being developed. The season you're in is equipping you for the one that's coming. Pain is one of the most misunderstood experiences in life. Most people try to avoid it at all costs, viewing it only as a sign that something has gone wrong. But pain, especially emotional and spiritual pain, often serves as a signal that something important is being worked out beneath the surface. It's not just discomfort, it's an invitation to pay attention. When life becomes painful, it's usually because a transition is underway. Something is shifting, something is being removed, or something inside you is being called to grow. That process hurts, not because you're failing, but because something deeper is forming. When you go through painful seasons, especially those marked by isolation, loss, or uncertainty, it can feel like you're being broken. But often you are not being broken down, you are being broken open. Pain exposes what has been hidden. It reveals the false securities, the illusions of control, and the misplaced identities. It strips away the excess, not to leave you empty, but to clear space for something more authentic and enduring. Pain is not the end of the story, it's the threshold. There is a kind of wisdom that only pain can teach. You can read about resilience, you can hear others speak about strength, but until you're in the fire yourself, until you've walked through your own valley, you don't truly know what you're made of. And that's part of the purpose. Pain reveals strength that was dormant. It awakens courage that you didn't know you had. It forces you to confront what matters most and discard what doesn't. In that way, pain becomes a clarifying force. The most meaningful growth often comes from the most difficult experiences. We don't grow in comfort, we grow in the stretch, in the tension, in the struggle. That doesn't mean we seek out pain for its own sake, but it does mean we stop wasting our suffering by trying to rush past it. Instead, we learn to sit with it. Ask it what it's trying to teach us, and allow it to shape us into people who are more grounded, more compassionate, and more whole. Pain is not random. It is part of the refining fire, and if you allow it, it will not only teach you, it will transform you. You may not be able to see it now, but every tear, every unanswered question, every sleepless night is doing a deeper work in you. The process is hard, but the fruit is real. There is purpose in your pain. So if you find yourself in a season of isolation, of silence, of waiting, of wondering why things have been stripped away, do not rush to despair. That space you're in, as uncomfortable as it may be, is not a void. It's sacred ground, a hidden workshop where your spirit is being shaped, your mind is being sharpened, and your purpose is being prepared. What feels like exile may in fact be the birthplace of something far greater than you could have imagined. You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are being formed. Don't misread the silence as absence. Don't misread the waiting as delay. And don't misread the isolation as punishment. Sometimes God isolates you not to break you, but to build you, not to crush your spirit, but to teach you how to carry something far greater. Trust the process. Honor the stillness and hold on to hope, because what is being formed in the dark will one day shine in the light. And when that moment comes, you'll understand why you had to go through what you did. Thank you for giving your attention, your heart, and your time. If this message spoke to something deep within you, let it settle, let it work. You're not alone, even in your solitude. You are part of something meaningful, and your story is still being written. Be well, be strong, and above all, stay faithful in the silence. Thank you and goodbye.